myself, Max McGillivray of Beanstalk. Really excited to launch this new broadcast series with the fantastic Jack Ward. Jack, say hello to everyone.
Good morning, and welcome to this. We're looking forward to it.
And I think Jack's got one of the best backgrounds. Jack, it's fascinating, this whole Zoom and Teams meeting malarkey. I suppose my background's a bit complicated, but we've got so many great companies that are looking to support us. And Jack, I didn't say in our green room, if it's okay, I'm going to put the British growers on here as well, because we're really keen to promote your colleagues and your group. But Jack, let's get into this, because the people watching live on Facebook and on LinkedIn and YouTube and the podcast, they want to know what this is all about and who you are. So the hugely well thought of and recognised British Growers Association is a grower-owned, grower-led, not-for-profit umbrella group. They comprise a range of organisations operating in the key horticultural industry and fresh produce sectors. Their membership includes crop organisations, producer organisations, marketing groups, and professional membership groups. Jack, I can't remember. What's your web address, please?
It's www.britishgrowers.org. So, and if anybody wants to find out a bit more about the organisation, pretty much everything on there is covered.
It's a very good website, very informative, as is the email marketing that comes out from Jack and his team. So Jack is the group CEO and has a prestigious background in the sectors, having previously held roles such as regional director for the NFU, director for the Oxford Farming Conference, chairman and trustee for Nuffield Farming Scholarship, CEO of the City and Guilds Land-Based Services, before becoming CEO of British Growers in 2014. Jack, are you okay to mention your new appointment as well?
I think we're just waiting for confirmation of it.
Okay, watch the space, everyone. It's going to be revealed by Beanstalk Global, the Daily Telegraph, and the Daily Mail that Jack has got another big thing on the offing. So, sorry to put you in the corner there, Jack. So with this monthly broadcast with Beanstalk, myself and Jack, we wish to explore and discuss key elements of the day surrounding fresh produce. Jack, we'll probably start with the UK, but at some point in the future, we might look to bring in some international contacts further down the line. And first up, we're going to have a conversation around the likes of the grower-funded R&D within the AHDB and the whole element of immigration and the seasonal workers and what will occur in 2020 and 2021 and beyond. But Jack, before we do that, I always ask this on our broadcast, because later on today, I'm doing a great broadcast with Global Women Fresh across 4 continents. It's fascinating hearing weather. Everyone's take on the weather. Myself and my son, my farming son, we were looking at some seed potatoes being planted over the weekend, and catching up with that with that tractor driver. He was saying, yeah, it's all going in well, but crikey, do we need some rain? And this is after the coldest, wettest winter that I think we've had on record. How's the weather with you, Jack?
Oh yeah, I know it's a bit of a joke, isn't it? A bit of a standing joke that here in Britain we always talk about the weather. We're always moaning about the weather because we are an island here, so we're blessed by variable weather conditions. But if you would just think back at the situation that we're facing at the moment, I think the issues surrounding climate change are becoming more and more important. You've just mentioned that we've been through, another exceptionally wet winter, and that was on the back of 2020, where we had another exceptionally wet winter. And in both situations, we've gone from a very wet winter into a very, very dry spell, right at the time when really we need a bit of rain to get the crops up and running. We could do with a bit of warm weather. And actually, we've had exactly the opposite. We've had this east wind. It's very, very drying. And we've had to contend with these frosts. And somebody put a picture up the other day on social media of some pea plants that we're right in the middle of vining pea drilling at the moment. And they were probably a couple of inches out the ground, completely frosted, but not only frosted once, they're being frosted morning after morning after morning. And actually, when you start to think that our entire food system, is based on being able to manage crops through these very extreme conditions, it just does start to trigger some thinking in the mind about, how we're going to contend with this and what we're going to look at in the future. And, this brings us sort of neatly into the whole issue of the whole research and development issue that we were going to talk about.
And Jack, It's a very good point. When was it? Last Monday night in the UK, we had a very sharp frost. Some areas reporting -4s, -5s. One of our contacts, who's a big strawberry grower in the West Country, they lost the equivalent of 40 tons of strawberry production because all those plants have been eliminated by this frost that no one was expecting. So not, Jack, not trying to sound like Donald Trump. Is climate change for real? Do your members, are they having to adapt their businesses because of the changes that they're seeing?
Yeah, and I think the difficulty is trying to second guess what's coming down the track, because there's a certain amount that you can do in terms of preparing for dry. Obviously, you can have irrigation, but a couple of years ago, we had the most horrendous rainstorms in June, and there's nothing you can do about that. But just practical examples. You've given the example there of the strawberry situation. I was talking to a grower the other day, and there's this issue about switching seasons. That we are coming to the end of the overwintered crops, and in a normal situation we would expect the new crops to start to be in the ground and starting to grow, and we could reasonably rely on those coming on stream in June, which would neatly dovetail in with the end of the import season. Now, because of the cold weather, it looks as though those crops are going to be delayed, so potentially we face a bit of a gap between the end of the UK season, the end of the import season and the start of the UK season. And all of that's got to be managed, because we're in this situation now where people expect the shops to be stocked 24/7. There's no concession to the weather. Just go somewhere and find it. But actually the weather, it's all about the weather, and it's just beginning to have a bigger and bigger impact and make what's already a difficult task of juggling the seasons and the crops and all the rest of it that little bit harder.
There's my classic story is, and it's a few years ago, there's a veg farmer that you'll know very well, and it was in one of our bitter winters about 4 or 5 years ago, and this MD was speaking to a key buyer from a key retailer, and the key retailer had a real nightmare getting into the offices in London. And saying how bad the snow was, and then the buyer said, "So where are my Brussels sprouts?" And the MD was going, "Well, don't you understand? Because you couldn't get in is why we can't harvest the Brussels sprouts, because we can't get into the field because because the frost is so bad." So there's even a lack of understanding within the retail level, but that's another route to go down. And just to, as you know, Joe, we have so many people on an international perspective dialing into these broadcasts. My love of Africa, it's fascinating. In Africa, the biggest issue is water or lack of it, and all these predictions that with climate change, the next war is not going to be over land or politics or religion. It's going to be over water. In the likes of Africa, on the eastern side, there's such a shortage of water. Luckily, South Africa's had a good deluge for their season, so the reservoirs are all topped up. But yeah, this isn't. Please be aware, everyone. I know you won't be, but this isn't just a UK problem. This is a global problem. So do you think with the likes of R&D, Jack, has that potentially got the method to solve this or to assist? Will farmers have an app on their phone telling them that 3 months out that the weather's going to do this and therefore they should do that, or pre-warn them that something bad's coming in so that they can where do you think the R&D side's going?
Well, it's interesting because obviously R&D is the whole of the future of R&D within the sector has been turned upside down by the recent AHDB ballot. As everybody knows, there's been a ballot about the compulsory levy within horticulture that's charged on most growers over a certain size. And obviously the decision has gone against having a continuation of the compulsory ballot. The decision as to what happens next now sits with the minister. And there have been conversations with various people in the ministry. And at the moment, it doesn't look like there's going to be a decision, because effectively they are in purdah, because we are about to, or in the process of going through the local elections. So I don't think there's anything going to happen till May. But you've got to kind of wonder whether the minister is really the right person to make this decision. It just strikes me as though the industry is very much better placed to sort out what it needs. And it is quite a divisive issue because the requirements of one part of the industry differ so greatly from the requirements of other parts of the industry. And I think the way I see it is, those parts of the industry which are very intensive, the protected cropping, where you're not using soil, you're not subject to the weather. There are all sorts of different options because you've operated in a protective environment, around crop protection. There are so many different things that you can do. And so the capacity to absorb technology and the outputs from R&D is just enormous because there are so many different things that you can do to react to different situations. So, you kind of sense that the appetite for R&D there is very, very great.
Yep.
If you come to the other end of the spectrum, and let's take vining peas. And let's not forget, let's remember that vining peas accounts for a quarter of the entire area of horticulture. There's about 40,000 hectares of vining peas. They're only in the ground for 15 weeks.
Wow.
Obviously, variety is a really critical issue, but you're looking at really a basket of varieties because you're starting to plant in March and you're drilling right the way through to June. You're looking for sequential harvesting. So that is quite a challenge around getting the right mix of varieties. There's a certain amount of crop protection, but that's often very responsive to whatever comes up at the particular time. But really, it's all about the weather growing vining peas. It's our biggest crop. It's the most popular vegetable. And so, the comparison between the application of R&D and technology for vining peas and the application of technology in some of the protected crops is just so completely different. And so, as an industry, I think we've got to work through these issues of how you accommodate this differing requirement for R&D from one crop to another. And it does take a bit of thinking through. I don't think there is an instant answer, and it's all about, having conversation and trying to understand what people want and looking at alternative structures. I think there is an appetite to carry out R&D, particularly around chemistry and minor use registrations. That's really critical. And I think everybody's agreed that needs to continue. The broader R&D requirements get more difficult because some people, want a continuous flow of R&D, and some people are going, well, actually, we haven't got a project at the moment. And I think what they're looking for is a kind of funding system which reflects the fact that they don't need to permanently contribute to a fund, which they then scramble about trying to spend once they get to the end of the year. So, we've had discussions with grower groups about how alternative structures might work, and I think we're beginning to see ideas develop. But I don't think it's going to be a quick process. But I think it's really, really important that the industry retains control over these discussions. We don't automatically assume that DEFRA, is all powerful and has the wisdom to get this decision absolutely right. It does require a lot of industry input.
Jack, well done, because it's a fascinating subject, and I'm so glad that you pointed out this oddity of the amount of R&D that's going into protected crop. Let's give an extreme example. In the States, every large market town now has a vertical farming setup. Aero farms, have a look at Aero farms. Aero farms has gained something like 400 million US in funding. As my slightly sanguine US contacts say, how many micro herbs can you actually eat? Because within these amazing, sophisticated, protected crop enterprises, what can you grow? You can only grow tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, salads. You cannot grow, Jack's example, vining peas, leeks, cabbages, carrots, potatoes. But it's I keep on saying this, Jack. It's a bit like a gold rush. We get so many requests, RM for Beanstalk and with our Red Fox recruitment business for vertical farming, for people coming into it, because it seems to be this like new messiah, and we all must get into it, and it's going to change the world. 70% of all the water used in the world is used on agriculture. Yes, to grow your potatoes that you then eat. It's regenerative, but it seems to be this huge naivety. And if there was a slightly negative grower, and they saw the demise of R&D within the likes of the AHDB structure, Jack, wouldn't they say, well, it's up to the seed houses to now do this R&D? I buy my seed off them. I pay them a nice price for the seed. Should they be doing the R&D max, Jack? What would you think to that?
Yeah, there's certainly an argument for that, and undoubtedly the seed houses do a lot of development work. But I think it's important that the growers have a degree of control over what projects benefit them as opposed to benefit other parts of the industry. And I think it is important that the growers have a degree of control, and they have an independent source of advice. I don't think realistically. One can leave it all to the seed houses or various other parts. I don't, they will play their part undoubtedly, but I think it's a bigger issue than that. And particularly when you start looking at things like sustainability. I mean, the government's come out with a new announcement about carbon targets, and I just can't help but think that this is going to become more and more important. It's going to just keep rising up the agenda. And we need to have some really good science and some really good evidence about, how we tackle the sustainability issue, because, there's a kind of balance to be struck between sustainability and limiting the carbon and actually producing food. Because, if you're going to take certain measures, there's going to be a compromise somewhere around how much food is produced. And somebody's got to make a decision about whether in this particular arena, we're better off reducing the emissions of carbon at the expense of producing food, and that's quite a difficult argument to understand, to get your head around. And in order to make those judgments, I think we are going to need quite a lot of independent R&D to look at those kind of things.
And Jack, I don't think you're involved with the broadcast that we did with the Healthy and Sustainable Food Group, and Avril was very, very kindly just asked the question, and she asked, just join the meeting, but if not covered, what links do you have with academia regarding working collaboratively in relation to R&D? And I keep on coming back to this Dutch model. Jack, do you remember the last City Food lecture in person? And I've forgotten her name. Lovely lady, professor from an institution in Holland, and her main summary was that in Holland they have the growers, they have the government, and they have academia. So they have this Dutch diamond where it's all working in a fantastic virtuous circle that everyone works on a collaborative basis. Academia, do you think that's going to be one of the solutions to this potential issue?
Yeah, I do. I do. And, it's something we might come on to later, because, there's a big opportunity for fresh produce, and I don't think we've joined the dots together. And now we have this opportunity because fresh produce is becoming, so important from a diet and health point of view. It's not just about growers. It's not just about the supply chain. It's not just about retailers. It's about the health of the nation. And, we can touch a bit on this later, but actually, I think there is an opportunity for a much bigger coalition around the development of a UK fresh produce industry, in order to address some of the health issues. And kind of what I see, Max, is we're regularly approached by universities and academic institutions for support when they're applying for government funding. I've actually had I had a conversation on Monday on this very subject. And I think there is a need to join it together and have, more of a vision about what's necessary, because otherwise what tends to happen is we've got a bit over here and a bit over there and a bit somewhere else. And I'm not quite sure where it's all leading to. And yet there is a need for this R&D, but I just think it needs to be better coordinated.
So if I can give you the proverbial magic wand, how would you create success on this subject?
Well, there are several other subjects that we were going to talk about, but what I was going to come on to was this idea, which I've been sort of hatching, is that we ought to be thinking in
Jack
terms.
Likes the hatch.
We ought to be thinking in terms of a fresh produce development fund, whereby we bring together all of the elements that have an interest in fresh produce. And that includes, the diet and health side of it, and we've just been through the pandemic, and all the evidence is suggesting that actually a healthy diet is really important. We know that we underconsume in terms of fresh produce, and actually those messages need to get out there. And we've got people like Veg Power at that end who are very focused on the health messages. We ought to bring them into the equation. We need to bring the R&D institutions into the equation. How do we make sure that we've got a properly funded R&D system? Yeah. There are all of the issues around automation and our over-reliance on labor. Yeah. There's productivity issues, there are crop protection issues, there are packaging issues. And I think, when you look at it from a grower point of view, all of these things have got to be tackled. But actually, is there the money within the industry to do this? If we're expected to put produce on the shelves at rock bottom prices, I think, there's got to be an acceptance that you can't do both. We can put produce on the shelves at rock bottom prices, but it's very difficult then to fund all these additional things which actually need to come together in order for the nation to benefit from fresh produce.
Okay, so I love your hatching. I think that's absolutely fantastic. To me, this whole sector is very, very fragmented, and there's very few people who actually are speaking for the sake of the sector to actually look to do this to create good. So just on the academia nutritional point, I was fascinated when the FAO and the United Nations went live at the top of the year with the 2021 Year of Fruit and Veg campaign. Looking at it on LinkedIn, there's some 1,000 people like the posts, and I thought this would be a bit quite curious as an individual. I wonder who's liked it, and they were all nutritionalists on a global basis, and there's hardly any fresh produce businesses or companies or individuals that I knew, because they weren't aware of it, because the FAO and the United Nations obviously presumably more focused towards that nutritional side. With some of the Beanstalk output that we've put, just like that question from fantastic Avril, there is this disjoint between us and the nutritionalists. Shows that I've been at where I've had stands, I've had so many nutritionists come up to us, and you then just get into this big thing about educating them as much as you can on a stand as to how blinking fresh produce is grown. There's that alone. And then there's a whole element of margins, that we haven't seen any decent food inflation for years, and the consumers unfortunately need to pay more for decent fresh produce. Jack, you and I both know that people who go in and they might fight, and don't swear, Max, moan about the price of fresh produce, but they'll then happily go and buy a £12 bottle of wine or some very expensive crisps or branded products. And everyone, including the likes of Kantar, is showing that the likes of the bog off offers, especially on the run up to Christmas, where you can, do you remember, Jack, we were debating about one of the discounters was just had these horrendously low prices out for veggies just on the week before Christmas. And Kantar has stated and showed on a statistical basis that dropping your pants on prices doesn't drive the consumer into store. So where do we get? So do we need to see? Let's start from the top down. Do we need to see retailers allowing this sector to have more margin so that they can do the R&D, which ultimately is going to be a benefit to the supermarket?
I think everybody would like to see more margin. I think it is the margins are very, very tight, and it certainly limits the opportunity for doing some of these other things, which is why I think, we might have to look to other sources of funding to support these activities if we cannot get the money out of the supply chain. And, I suppose given their due, they face intense competition from one another. They think they're doing a good job because they're giving the public very, very competitively priced food. But my goodness, it does take some doing, and it does involve squeezing the supply chain, incredibly hard. But I think, probably this is where we need more of a joined up approach, in terms of understanding, how we get the nutritional messages out there. And this is not something that really growers can do or should be involved in, but, we could act as a catalyst. to try and make this happen, bring groups together. And, I come back to Veg Power, they've done a terrific job, but they probably need more support, more funding. And, just coming back to your point about the FAO Year of the Vegetables, I had a conversation with somebody, I think way back when, about the Year of the Vegetables. But actually, the conversation started with first go and raise a large amount of money to fund whatever it is you want to do. And you just think, well, that's runs, the possibility of duplicating other things that are already happening. So at that point, it sort of slightly slipped down the agenda. But, there are all sorts of different people who have a part to play. Public procurement's another element. Fruit in schools, just all needs bringing together in a way that doesn't happen at the moment. It's very disjointed. Look at that. It's very disjointed. And I just think there is a much bigger, a much better opportunity, and not purely from a self-interest point of view of the growers, but actually there is a really important health message here that we need to get across. The sort of components, the constituent parts of vegetables, how well do we understand what it is a carrot delivers that we need? How well do we understand what it is that broccoli delivers, or cherries deliver, or strawberries deliver? We just kind of, I think exist in a state of ignorance.
Jack, I've got to so slightly walk across you, because I just remember a broadcast I did about a month ago with one of the directors of the World Obesity Federation, and they're really keen for obesity to be registered as a disease with the United Nations, because if it's registered as a disease, more formal action can be taken against fatty foods, sugar-laden food. And this individual was really keen to engage with everyone within the fresh produce sector because of those very reasons, that if people were fully aware of what a carrot does for you, or what an apple does for you, it might actually put them off buying some rubbishy energy drink. Just going back a bit, you're a great promoter. We're a great promoter of Veg Power, and Dan Parker and his amazing team. And they've, crikey, talk about creating success with from dust with what they've done previously with TV advertising campaigns, and they're going live again. The social media is already live, and they're going live. I met a large grower about 6 months ago, and I just asked him what did he think of Veg Power, and he didn't know what Veg Power was. And I thought, oh God, that's annoying, disappointing. But actually, why does he have to? Because he as you intimated, his skill set is growing fantastic fantastic fresh produce, and if anything, it's the likes of you, me, and Dan, and government agencies and nutritionists and schools and the procurement element to promote the likes of Veg Power and fruit and veg, so people just get it. So being ever the optimist, Jack, it does feel like the timing is so pertinent that it's all coming towards us. Boris Johnson was ill on the back of COVID because, in his own words, he was a fatty, and he's going to do things to stop that. So to get the government on board to push this health message, to have the likes of obesity registered as a disease, to have fatty foods be heavily taxed or removed, because that's going to give a positive upside to the NHS and other health services across the world. But it does feel like there's a lot of work to be done. Jack, it does feel to me that there's a lot of this is about money. These industries that are involved with the production of fatty foods, high sugar foods, they make significant margins. If you remember a City Food lecture 4 or 5 years ago, the speaker was, I'll never remember his name, he was a president for PepsiCo for Europe. And after he'd done his talk, Chris White of FruitNet Media, FPJ, Eurofruit Magazine, asked him when PepsiCo were going to start investing in bananas as an example. And his retort straight back was, well, when you show me that there's money to be made in bananas, we'll invest in bananas. And case in point, you go to any supermarket today and you buy bananas that have been shipped halfway across the world for half a dozen bananas, 89p as a guess, and you won't buy Pop-Tarts for under £2.50. So it comes back to what we were saying, Jack, about that food inflation. So I think you're spot on. but what we don't want to create is a talking shop. And I'm sorry to keep on asking the question, Jack. How come we've given you this magic wand? How can we really push it through to create this success?
Well, I think just on the subject of money, I don't think it actually requires large amounts of money. I just think it requires a little bit of money put in the right direction, because, as you say, Veg Power have done amazing things with virtually no funds at all. They've scraped together a few quid here and there from various people, and they've done amazing things. And I think it's not a vast amount of money in particularly in overall government terms. I'm a keen subscriber to Private Eye, and I almost hate reading through and seeing how people extract money out of the government for meaningless projects. There was one recently where I thought, my goodness, £140 million for doing that. And you think, if £100 million was put into a fresh produce development scheme, how much could be achieved and how many people would feel the benefit of that? In the overall scheme of things, £100 million, is not that big a fund. But I think, we've got a real opportunity now, because historically we've been saddled with the CAP. And there's been very little support for horticulture, and I think it's resulted in a fairly fragmented industry. Some bits of it have survived and thrived, and some bits of it have struggled. But now, because of the health issue, there is this real opportunity to bring all the elements together. And I suppose, that's one of the roles of organisations like the NFU and British Growers, is to try and set out this vision, to create this vision, or to talk about the opportunity for this vision, and try and bring people together, to sort of coalesce around this vision, because as we've seen with academia, there are people in universities who are very interested in this. There's a research side that's very interested in it. Public procurement is very interested in it. Public Health England is very interested in it. The grower base is very interested in it. The supply trade is very interested in it. The retailers have got an interest in making sure that they're doing the right things. It's just joining the dots together.
And Jack, thank you. I think that's why we love you, because there's very few people in your type of situation representing the groups that you speak about who actually speak like this, because everyone is just following the party line for all the right reasons, but you're actually coming up with potential solutions and happy to talk and collaborate. I'm going to put my Private Eye head on and cross the line. 32 billion that we spent in the UK on our track and trace system for all the very good valid reasons. You show me where that 32 billion has gone. The track and trace app that I've got on my phone now isn't authorized to work with Google and Apple in the respect of tracking my movements, because it breaks all data protection. So that's now null and void. Doesn't work. And we're talking about the vaccines in the UK. When I get my second vaccine, it will be somehow logged onto my passport. So that's going to be my vaccine passport. So where the hell's that 32? As you say, Veg Power had a tiny little bit of that, going back to Boris Johnson saying I was ill because I was chubby and we're going to make a difference. I suppose there's this huge conversation in the UK at the moment about lobbying, and how some individuals are very successful lobbyists because of the background. I suppose that's where, are we weak on this side, Jack, or are we just not heard because we don't have the money to spend on big lobby firms compared to banks and oil companies and gas companies? But again, being positive, it's coming towards us.
No, I think on lobbying, I think we do a very, very good job, and we have a very good relationship with the, with the elements in DEFRA. I mean, it's quite amusing. Every so often I get an email from somebody offering me their PR services. And I had one this week about seasonal labour. Have you seen the latest around Pick for Britain? We'd like to offer our lobbying services. And you think, you're just way behind the curve. I have a relationship, with key people in DEFRA. I don't overexploit it. I manage it very carefully. I'm very respectful. But also, and this is one of the things I picked up on my Nuffield Scholarship. I remember sitting there with John Gummer. He very kindly agreed to meet me, and I sat in his office And he said, generally in lobbying, we're looking for a bit of a deal. You help me and we'll help you. He said, you sit there in cabinet and you say, I've had this approach from whichever industry it is and they want X, Y, Z. And there's a kind of discussion around, well, what are we getting in return? How are they going to help us? And I think a lot of the success around lobbying is about saying, well, here's a workable solution. I understand the predicament you're in, government, that you have a finite amount of money. You have people at either end of the spectrum, expecting the impossible. You want something that makes you look good. And I think the art of successful lobbying is to try and present solutions to the government which, are acceptable and, don't present them with a whole lot of problems in a different area. And I think, quite often, I'm just amazed at the lobbying row. You just think, I wouldn't send a text to somebody. When we want the minister to do something, we set it out in a letter. Dear Minister, here's the problem. This is what we think could be done. Would you like to help? It's Paul above board. This idea you send a text. I was horrified by it.
And you look what's happened in the UK in the last couple of days, last 24 hours with a new football league that was going to be set up, and Boris Johnson was alerted to it within 12 hours. He was saying, we're going to stop this. Go back to this whole conversation about fresh produce. The lady from the World Obesity Federation, I can't remember her name, as she said, in the UK, Max, you had your clunk click campaign because there were too many road fatalities from people not wearing seatbelts, and there was an outcry about that. But do we all wear seatbelts now? Yes. Has road safety dramatically increased? Yes. Tobacco, Max. Look what happened with tobacco. The government realised that there was a tsunami of cancer cases coming from us all fagging, and that needed to be stopped. And now it has, and all the stats are showing that we're far better on a health perspective. And Max, the same needs to happen with sugary food. We need a clunk click campaign. We need a stop killing yourself by spending £10 on a box of fags. We need the same thing to remove sugary food from our diets and to eat fresh produce instead. So where am I going with this one? Surely, with all your professional lobby, surely the government must see that. And again, go back to Veg Power, for them to have, oh God, just give them 10 million, just to get. One thing that you said, Jack, was very interesting. That the money's got to come somewhere. As a crazy example, we Beanstalk have been commissioned by a fund that wants to buy or get involved or joint venture with fresh produce companies, and they've got a fund worth over more than 500 million euros to look at. Do you think with that new money that's coming in, because there's a lot of excitement about investing in agribusiness and fresh produce, should there be a levy placed on them, or should we be leaning on them on a philanthropic basis to invest into veg? Where do you think the new money should come from?
Well, I think there is a real opportunity for external investment. We occasionally get approached by funds looking for opportunities within the fresh produce industry, and I think again, it comes back to this point that it's all a bit disjointed, that, there may be opportunities to invest in R&D in various systems, because obviously everybody is looking for a return. But because the industry is relatively fragmented, it's not obvious where you go. If you'd got, £100 million investment fund, you were looking to do something in the fresh produce industry, where would you start? They've obviously come to talk to you, they come to talk to us, but actually it's quite difficult to find your way through the jigsaw puzzle of the fresh produce industry. And I just think that if we had a much more holistic approach, to say that this is what we're trying to achieve, here are the opportunities around, diet and health and nutrition and procurement and R&D and production and packaging, it would just create a much stronger focal point for external people looking in on the industry.
And again, I think the market is coming towards us. So the likes of Legal & General, they stated to the 100 top companies that they invest in that if they don't have a diversified board by the end of 2022, they'll be withdrawing their funding from those businesses. And this, we're seeing that with other investors into other businesses, that they want to invest into businesses in food that are doing good. So if there's a double pressure from government to try and eliminate, mitigate sugary food production, more towards growing fresh produce, again the market there might be behavioural change on an investment basis on that basis. Just to give you a crazy example, Jack, a contact of mine let's go for overseas, he keeps on being approached by headhunters for funds in New York. So these funds are the like sheep. And what I picked up is that in the last recession, agribusiness and fresh produce was seen as a safe haven. And so a lot of funding went in, and exactly the same is happening on the back of the pandemic, that agribusiness and fresh produce are seen as a safe haven. So there's a lot of New York-based funds that want to get into the sector, have no idea, no Scooby-Doo about how it works. And so they're just reaching out to anyone who's a senior player within fresh produce to come and work for this fund or funds to give them direction as to where they invest in. Why am I saying that? Again, it just shows where the market is going in the short term. And if there was a method of using some of that capital coming in for good to grow fresh produce, that some of that could go into funding for the likes of the veg power schemes. And the bit that always frightens them, Jack, when they actually get into when they lift up the bonnet of the sector, they don't realise that if you're planting a new orchard, that it takes, pick a number, 4 or 5 years before you get any production. Avocados, 5 years. Walnuts, 6 years. So it's not like a number of these funds are used to of buying something and then flipping it 4 years, 5 years down the line. You're getting involved in agriculture and fresh produce. It's a long-term proposition that you've got to look at.
Yeah, so I think it's about raising the profile of fresh produce, and it's not just about raising it from a grower perspective. It's raising it in a way that strikes a chord with everybody, and this health argument sits right at the centre of it, and the importance of getting a balanced diet, and just what a difference that is going to make to people's existence, their length of life, their quality of life. It just seems to be such a good opportunity. And you just feel that things are coming together at the moment. There's an opportunity now which just needs to be seized upon and capitalized on.
Well said. And I'm loving this broadcast. I'm going to make sure that I share it with a number of key supporters in this sector so that they can hear from you, Jack, and hopefully engage with you in the future. Just one side, I just want to pick up on, going back to government. I'm just going to read out a headline. Growers unhappy as DEFRA drops Pick for Britain campaign. So we're talking about how the government is looking to be very positive towards horticulture. What's your view of DEFRA dropping the Pick for Britain campaign that went live just over a year ago?
I'm not. I think the headline is slightly misleading, if I'm honest.
It was from the Daily Mail.
Actually, I had a conversation with a journalist on a similar tack yesterday, and let me explain what I said to her. Pick for Britain was an initiative from a year ago when we were in a very, very different situation. The pandemic was upon us. All the borders were locked down. We didn't know whether we'd find anybody to pick any crops. And Pick for Britain did a fantastic job of raising the profile of how fresh produce is produced and the importance of seasonal labour and people to pick it. It generated a few new people who came into the industry as a result. It picked up a few pickers. But in terms of actually sourcing workers, it probably wasn't the number one issue. There is a very well worked system of recruitment agencies and farms who do their own recruitment and so on and so forth. And that really provides the backbone of recruiting people. So this year, I think the industry had a long, hard look at whether, what to do about Pick for Britain, and actually came to the conclusion that what was required was a much more targeted initiative. I think, one of the issues with Pick for Britain was that, you ended up with, I think the example I gave yesterday was, somebody in Bristol ringing up and saying, oh, I'd like to come and pick fruit. I'm available on Thursday afternoon for 3 hours. And they go, well, okay, so there's a farm near Hereford that's looking for people. And I go, well, it's 2 hours away. I can't be doing that. And I think there was this big mismatch. Yeah. And so this year, what's happening is that the industry, DEFRA, is working much more closely with the Department for Work and Pensions and the job centres to make sure the job centres are fully briefed about the industry, about where the opportunities exist, about what the opportunities look like, so they can try and join together people who are looking for jobs in specific areas with opportunities in particular areas that, you know, stand a sporting chance of actually working. And I think, you know, actually it's a logical progression. It's not as described by the Daily Mail. You know, it's a logical progression of the scheme, and, you know, to be honest, makes quite a lot of sense.
Yeah, well said. Well, intellectually murdered the questionable reporting by the likes of the Daily Mail. If you want the real answer, speak to Jack. So Jack, we're just slightly running out of time. I just want to give a big rah-rah towards British Growers again. If people aren't aware or would like to be associated with British Growers, what can British Growers do for them? Whether they're from the nutritional side, whether a grower who might not already be a member, whether there might be a retailer, or whether they're an overseas company, how can they get involved, and what can they get from British Growers, please?
Well, all our contact details are on the website, but it would be interesting to hear from people who have got an interest in, you know, building, you know, a brighter future for fresh produce, because I think it is going to be more of a coalition of all sorts of different organisations. You know, and I think we would be interested in hearing from research organisations, from other organisations who've got this interest in seeing this coalition of interested parties. So, you know, if people are interested in, you know, developing this idea, have a look on our website, the contact details there. It'd be great to hear from you.
And if it's okay, Jack, we can I speak for both of us? We'd love to have this sort of conversation. If you want to come and join Jack and I in our next broadcast in May to debate this, to get this conversation going. What Jack and I do not want to do is create a talking shop. We want to. What do we say, Jack? We want to create the conversation rather than be part of the conversation. Yeah. And as I said before, Jack is very unusual in that he is positively unusual, Jack, in that you're very vocal about where you think this sector needs to go, rather than just towing a particular party line. So Jack is here to make a difference. So engage with British Growers. Have a look at them online, and if it's okay, Jack, look at Jack on LinkedIn to link in with him as well. Jack, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. We've covered a lot of ground, and I do hope that with all of us together coming into partnership collaboration, that we can actually make this difference. And to reiterate it does feel that the timing is just right. Coming out of the back end of the pandemic, the government's looking to do more. We've got lots of the Veg Power campaign coming through in the UK. We've got the UN FAO 2021 Year of Fruit and Veg. Jack, anything to say before we wrap up?
No, just to reciprocate. I think it's been great to have this opportunity. I think very important to emphasise that I don't have the monopoly on wisdom. We are a very small organisation, but I think, you know, we're keen on having the conversation, you know, bringing in new ideas, fresh thinking, and this opportunity to communicate with a bigger audience, you know, is just terrific. So if there are people out there who want to engage, please do so.
Jack, I'm just going to read out a point from Avril, who's very kindly dialed in and supporting us. In support of the health considerations, please note NICE, National Institute for Healthcare and Excellence, on Monday 19th of April just launched its new strategy for 2021 to 2026, and one of the key points they made was supporting much more integrated collaborative work. So there's a link between academia, what Avril, well done. Thank you for that. Jack, thank you very much for your time. You be well, and we look forward to seeing you on the next broadcast in May.
Brilliant. It's been a complete pleasure. Take care, Max. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.